everyone, I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today we are going to talk about my poetry collection, Synesthesia Pandemic. This particular poetry collection is unique in that it is written by both me and Bryan. So all of the other poetry collections feature poetry only written by me, whereas this one, during lockdown, Bryan and I took turns writing poetry where I would write a line, and then he would write a line, and then I would write a line, and we would just go along until we both decided that the poem was finished, and then we'd do the next one. And all of these poems have themes around COVID and around the political unrest at the time, about the Black Lives Matter movement, and also just the general insanity of being a person during lockdown and having all these fears swirling around you, but also the impotence of just being at home and not being able to go anywhere, not being able to interact with people, and not being able to really do a whole lot about any of the crazy things that were going on during this time period. It's definitely a snapshot in history, and the fear and the despair really comes through. So this poetry collection is absolutely not for the faint of heart. It might be a little bit triggering, honestly, for some people, depending on what their experiences were during lockdown and during the pandemic in general. It was particularly scary because Bryan and Maria did actually catch COVID, and they got very, very sick. And there was a point where I was very afraid for their safety, and thank goodness they made it through, because they are two very important people in my life. During this time period also, specifically during lockdown, I was living with my best friend, Jerfay, and they caught COVID right at the beginning of lockdown. It was absolutely terrifying. They caught that first wave of it, and it hit them hard. I remember when they did the doctor's test when they finally recovered, and it shows you the level of antibodies you had to indicate like how severe of a strain you had, and the normal indicator was something like, don't quote me on this, I don't quite remember. It was several years now. It's 2024 now, but it was something like 0.5, like 0.5 or something like that was, yeah, you had COVID. Jerfay had like 7 point something. Like they had hundreds of times more percent of what was the indicator for, yeah, you had COVID. Like they had wow, you had horrible, so much COVID, like terrifying. And taking care of them, and just the absolute horror of just seeing all of the updates day by day as scientists were learning about this virus, learning about what to do about the virus, and just seeing Jerfay deteriorate was terrifying. Especially, I personally have a severe phobia around death. I have seen a lot of death in my life. I have been to so many funerals ever since I was a small child. I have had to go to professional therapy for all of the trauma around all of the death that I have experienced in my life, especially as a small child. I actually have clinical PTSD from it. It's that bad. So seeing this in action and seeing it firsthand with taking care of Jerfay, and there was actually a short period of time, a few days, where I genuinely did not think Jerfay was going to make it. It was so scary. And y'all, let me tell you, during lockdown, having to Google what do I do if there is a dead body in my apartment is not a thing you want to have to Google, especially because during that time period, that was when the morgues were full and they were keeping bodies in refrigerated trucks on the streets. It was horrific. And being a first-hand person experiencing this, and thank God Jerfay made it. It was nothing short of a miracle that they made it. And I am blessed every day that they are still in the world, shining their light and just making a difference and being a beautiful human being. But these were some dark days. So all of that definitely comes through in these poems, as well as Bryan and Maria at the time were living in Dubai and having COVID in Dubai, which was really scary, being in a foreign country and navigating all of that. And there was a point where the country was going to shut down, and they had to make the decision of, okay, do we stay and see what happens, and what happens, Bryan could have potentially lost his job, which meant that they would have lost their income, they would have lost their house. In Dubai, one of their laws there is if you can't pay your bills, you go to jail. It's very serious. So like if you lose your job, you either have to leave the country or you go to jail. That's why in Dubai there are so many abandoned vehicles at the airports, because it's people who literally had to pack up and leave so that they didn't go to jail for losing their jobs and not being able to pay their bills. It's wild, y'all. So they had to make the decision that they saw the writing on the wall and they're like, okay, I guess we're done living in Dubai. And they had to come back to the States and just completely rebuild their lives here. And just going through all of that with all of the everything that was going on was just nothing short of crazy. So all of that is also in these poems, with Bryan's personal experience dealing with that and having to move to another country, which was certainly no picnic. So there's definitely some very first-hand perspectives in this particular poetry collection. It's not for the faint of heart. It is a snapshot of history, but I so highly recommend reading it. It is so raw, it is so important, and it is so fantastic. Just all of the back and forth that Bryan and I did, it just became such an incredibly beautiful thing, the way that we were able to kind of get on this wavelength together and write these poems back to back together. So another thing to note is this particular poetry collection does not have any pictures in it. And a big part of that was due to the time period. We weren't able to like go out and take pictures of things, as well as it kind of begged the question of what kind of pictures would we include in this? And then that also brought the whole host of, you know, getting permissions to use photos of stuff that was happening at the time and all that kind of stuff. And it was just too complex for us to handle. So it's strictly just the poems, but I did design the cover art. This is actually an illustration of the coronavirus under a microscope. And the reason why it looks a little weird is it's actually the same colors by green screen. So it's actually picking up my logo as if this were green screens. That's why it looks a little weird, but this is all green if you actually get the book, and these little guys are also green. But yeah, I will read a couple of excerpts for y'all. Feel free to click away to the end of the video if it's a little bit too much for y'all, but I highly recommend this piece. It's an important piece. Number 68. The sound of jackboots echoes down the alley. The smell of tear gas and fear waft through the window. Rubber bullets smash glass and bounce off the walls. Stores are looted, burned, and left for dead. Trash everywhere. Broken glass litters sidewalks. Tear gas canisters still smoking in the street. Blood drying on pavement. The cadence of boots upon cement. Wave upon wave of anguished lament. Paddy wagons full, jails soon to follow. The shadow of oppression darkens the sky, staining the streets with violence and lies. Number 17. For this night I must steal away into the mist and fog of the damned. The lantern of shadows lights the way. The damned march on to their distant drumbeat, only heard by those dead and dying. And yet they continue to march into the abyss, bones clanking and sinew snapping. Empty eye sockets stare into the abyss, a horde coming to steal away the world of the living. The hell gate brimmed with its mist-like shadow. Red-hot chains slither to gather yet more lost souls. Their mouths open to scream, but no sound can escape. Into the void, no comfort of death. Death waits for us all. There is no escape. Number 81. Seeds sown upon the winds of deceit, briars that grow and twine, round the lungs and strangle the cries of, I cannot breathe. Such a statement uttered so frequently, both silenced under ignorance and greed. Forlorn, poor souls wretched and snuffed out and diseased. The death toll rings loud with the mass graves and unclaimed deceased. Marches and bullhorns, chants and fists held high, all for those who have died. Their last words, I cannot breathe. So I want to thank y'all so much for listening to these particular poems. I know they are difficult to listen to, they are difficult to read, but they are an important part of history, and I am so grateful that Bryan and I had the wherewithal to be able to write these together and to be able to document our thoughts going through this particular experience and to be able to share this with y'all. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a like, and if you're new, subscribe. All right, y'all, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.